Chao.
Okay. Thanks everyone for staying around. I'm excited to have with me two founders of companies that Innoven has provided debt to up on stage. I've got Casey, who's the co-founder of Pomelo Fashion, leading Thai e-commerce company. And then we've got, I think most of you will know Eric, who is the founder of Carsome, one of the leading used car selling platforms in Southeast Asia. We don't have a lot of time to go through all the questions I'd like to do, so I'm going to jump right into it. Casey, you were, I guess, Pomelo Fashion was one of the first companies that we provided debt to back in early 2016. I guess maybe give us, what has progressed on the company front and on the fundraising front for Pomelo Fashion since then.
Yeah. So I think, just to give a little bit of context, Innoven invested after our Series A, and really the purpose of that was to kind of prove out our business model a little bit more before we had to go into our Series B fundraising. At the time, we were making a fair number of structural changes to the company, really to get it ready for the next stage of growth. And so the more progress we could show along that, the better our valuation and fundraising capabilities would be for our Series B. So in October last year, we raised our Series B, which was $19 million US, led by JD.com. So,
great. Eric, I guess the same question. I mean, I think we first got involved in the middle of last year. What has happened for Carsome since then?
Yeah, so 12 months ago, we raised a Series A, and that comes with an Innoven investment and venture debt. And ever since then, we have raised another round. So there's a Series B we closed not long ago. So in total, we have raised about 25 million between the two rounds. And at the same time, the transaction volume for the platform, we have grew 400% since the first time Innoven involved in the investment. So right now, we are basically using this funding to further expand and penetrate into the markets that we are in. So we are separately in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore. And I think this actually helped us to gain some foothold and further penetration in the markets that we're in right now.
Okay, great. Now, the headline numbers, I guess recently, I just was reading my notes, both of you announced a $19 million fundraise, and just coincidentally the same amount in the Series B. Just, people hear that, and from my recollection, that didn't happen overnight. I think it was a pretty, I won't say long process, but longer than probably both of you expected. I guess, why don't we, share your experience through that process, what you learned, maybe tips, maybe lessons learned, those kind of things. I think everybody would be interested to sort of hear, what you guys went through. Casey? Yeah, for your Series B.
Yeah, I think from our side, it was, I think we kind of went after a lot of tech investors at first, like pure technology investors. But being in e-commerce, it's a little bit of both, right? There's your very physical, operational side of things, as well as the technology platforms that kind of support that. And then on top of that, we were starting to think about offline retail. And so then the question became, well, is pure tech investors really going to understand this kind of business model, or think it's scalable enough, or any sort of that thing? And what we've kind of found over the last year or so is that a certain set of investors really understand. It's typically a lot of people with retail experience that kind of look at us and say, oh, we understand exactly what you're trying to do. We really believe in the vision of omni-channel and the way that we're particularly trying to strive for it. And then after we kind of found that those set of investors, and having good strategic conversations with them during the diligence process, and making sure that we're aligned on how to pursue that vision, that I think was really what made the difference. Now, and part of what it took longer than I would have liked. I always feel like it's a distraction from the business, yeah, but ultimately I think we ended up with a good set of partners that are really going to support the business into the next phase.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I think fundraising is never easy to start off with, and I think the way we approach fundraising is the same as when I first started a business. I was looking for a co-founder, so very much we look at who are the people who can contribute to the business. So at the same time, when we looking at the investors could come in to help us, we don't just want to look at the monetary gain. So the strategic collaboration, the synergy between the investors and us is going to be very important. So, and this is essentially like, having an external leadership team that helps you, talk about the business externally. Also, borrowing the network to you so that you could reach out to more partners that can help you grow the business, possibly not just in one country, but in multiple countries. So when we look at, the kind of, fundraising technique, like for example, when we talk to investors, we tend to look at investors who could help us on every part, strategic collaboration and so on. So I think that helped us to understand better on the investor side, and that help investors to gain more confidence when we look for them for investment.
Okay. I guess more specifically, let's talk about, would you do anything different, looking back, would you do anything differently?
Well, I think I have a much better appreciation in terms of, I don't know that I could have done anything differently, but I think the vision for what we're trying to do over the last year has really solidified. So I think, had I done that, it would have maybe been a little bit smoother in terms of, getting to the point, right? And, but I don't think, it's a learning process, okay, right? So I think you just kind of have to figure it out as you go, in some sense. And but like you said, it's never easy because it's a matchmaking process, right? It's very asymmetrical information on either side. Okay. From my side, I don't know exactly how a certain investor looks at our business and what are the areas that he really cares about, and and vice versa as well. So I think trying to find that alignment early on is probably what I would have spent a little bit more time doing, rather than just going through exactly the same way with every investor that we meet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think first of all, like fundraising is very distracting, right? So at the same time, I felt that at the beginning, so my co-founder is very much in charge of the operations, whereas like I'm the only one who do a lot of fundraising activities. So I felt that it would be more helpful if at the very beginning I knew that I should have a team together, so hire another 1 or 2 more persons to help me out on the whole fundraising process. So it was very distracting, took me out of the business, and I was very much involved in pitching rather than growing the business. So I felt that if I have an extra helping hand in the beginning, that would actually speed up the entire process rather than doing it all by myself.
Yeah, that was going to lead me to my next question in terms of, I'm always curious, how do founders balance time between fundraising and running the business? Because fundraising is not easy, running the business is not easy. There's only 24 hours in a day. How do you balance that time, and between those two activities?
You don't. Well, no, I think the only real solution to that is having a really good management team, right? I've always kind of looked at my role as, more and more so at least, as someone who helps remove roadblocks, based on my position within the company, right? I can say, okay, you know what, we don't need to do this way. We don't, maybe take this shortcut and move ahead, or have you thought about doing it like this? But in terms of coming up with initiatives and kind of driving them forward, we have 200 people now, so having a really strong second layer is super important for that. And I would say that we probably only recently got there after the Series B. So, I mean, if you were to look at our revenue chart, you know, during the fundraising period, there will be 1 or 2 months where it's just kind of flat.
Okay.
Yeah, I think even up to today, I'm still sort of struggling to balance in between both fundraising and also growing the business. So definitely growing the business is more of an objective for the founders, but at the same time, we needed some of these funding to help us, you know, grow much faster. So I think circling back to what I just mentioned earlier, having a team to help us out on that would actually do a lot more, you know, take a lot off the plate so that we can be more focused on growing the business rather than just fundraising.
Another question I think a lot of people always wonder is, how do you balance when you're fundraising, you know, from a founder point of view, equity dilution on the one hand, and raising sufficient capital to actually grow the business to meet growth and, you know, investor expectations? And sort of how do you guys think about that, that balance?
Yeah, I mean, there's really two sides to it. I mean, it's not really two sides, it's a spectrum, right? On one side, you can say, I'm going to take as little money as possible to get to the next stage that I need to. And then when my company is bigger and, you know, I can get a better valuation, I'll raise more money. So theoretically, you could do a round every year or every 9 months, if that's the goal. Now, of course, the downside to that is you're almost constantly fundraising. And so back to the question, can you really grow the business that way? But I think the way that we've typically approached it is we kind of set milestones for where we want to get to within a certain round of funding, and what we want to achieve with that, and that's kind of how we determine it. I think there's also market dynamics that are quite important to think about as well. You know, if the global public markets start going down, investor sentiment starts going down, it kind of affects it globally. And, you know, your valuation would go down as well. So, you know, raising every year, let's say, to maximize or to minimize equity dilution may actually backfire. So, you know, a lot of advisors have said, you know what, just raise as much money as you can when you can.
Yeah, I think it's, for example, like Carsome, when we first raised our Series A, I think the market condition for a Series A round wasn't that good. So we were having some difficulties to, you know, negotiate for the best term for the company. So likewise, even for our Series B, when we were doing the fundraising, it was also a Series B crunch. So the funding gap has been happening whenever we wanted to raise an A round or a B round. So I think one of the approach that we took is, you know, to have venture debt to be a consideration of funding, because some of the funds that we use are for the working capital need. So, and it helps for us to, you know, get the same amount of funding, but on the other hand, we lose less on dilution, right? So I think that is how we consider a much lower, or in a sense, like more favorable term for the company, but at the same time, we still get the same amount of support from the funding side.
Okay. We're almost out of time, but I would want to just leave you guys with, I mean, what can we expect from Pomelo Fashion in the next 12 to 18 months, and what can we expect from Carsome in the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, we're going to continue to build out our retail footprint and, you know, quite synergistic with our online. We're going to expand the assortment probably 2 or 3 times over the next year and a half, and you know, probably pick a few more core markets that we'll get into.
Okay.
I think so. Carsome has been usually known as a car disposal platform in the market. So we help people to sell their cars using an online auction system. So I think as we grow the platform in the market, we thought of, you know, going deeper into the supply chain, because the whole buying and selling car experience has been very much ineffective. So it takes a lot of time to sell a car. It also takes a lot of time to actually buy a car. So we want to take away the whole complicated process of selling a car and buying a car. So by introducing more services, so some of the things that we'll be rolling out gradually in the market is financing product, insurance, warranty, that ties with buying a car. And we will be doing this in the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, great. Well, I see our time's up. Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Eric, for sharing. And thanks for everybody for listening. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. The truth about capital, a founder's perspective. And Chao, our
Thanks.
moderator, thank you very much.